Today on the Leadership Vision podcast, there are 3 urgent needs that all leaders need to focus on. Knowing your people, investing in your people, keeping your people.
The executive leader of today is facing a crisis. And this crisis is, if they don't change, they're going to lose their job. And if they don't change to focus on how they're going to invest and keep and retain their people are going to leave and they're going to have more job openings. So the jobs are at stake.
I would encourage leaders to partner together in ways that maybe they haven't before, and really find ways to listen and find ways to live in the tension of polarities and not pick sides and not let fear lead to anger. Because there's one thing that we want to do at Leadership Vision, and that's shine light on the goodness of humans, the potential of teams, and what would it mean if organizations were thriving and alive and casting light into the world. And I'm optimistic and idealistic enough to believe that it could happen.
You are listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, sharing our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths, the strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Freeberg, and as you heard Linda there at the top of this episode mention, today on the Leadership Vision podcast, we're going to be talking about the 3 urgent needs that all leaders need to focus on. And before we get into this, I want to set it up just a little bit. So Brian and Linda have been having a lot of conversations recently about kind of the changing dynamics of the post-COVID world, if we can call it that, and how leaders are aware more than ever of the desire and need to keep their people, because employees have had kind of this crazy experience of the last 2 years of COVID, where they're sort of prioritizing more what they want their ideal kind of work environment to look like. So there's this tremendous battle for talent. People are leaving left and right. You've probably heard about kind of the great resignation of people being very selective and leaving jobs everywhere from like servers at restaurants to, high-level executives, and just it's hard to keep talent. And so Brian and Linda have been having not even totally planned conversations, but conversations with clients, people that we're working for, with partners, with advisors, with a lot of people who say kind of all the same thing, that this is the greatest need. And what we have realized at Leadership Vision is that we are in a unique position to be able to kind of meet these 3 things in ways that haven't really been done before. And so here's a conversation that is normally we like make an outline. This was literally just one of those conversations where Brian and Linda and I were processing some of the stuff. And so you're going to hear it here today. There's a few beeps, as like I said, we were talking. We weren't swearing. We're beeping out the names of people because we weren't necessarily intending this to be a podcast, but I think it's really valuable, and there's just a lot of good stuff here. So here's a conversation, how to know, invest, and keep your people. If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to us, connect at leadershipvisionconsulting.com, and there's also links in the show notes. Here you go.
The executive leader of today is facing a crisis. And this crisis is, if they don't change, they're going to lose their job. And if they don't change to focus on how they're going to invest and keep and retain their people are going to leave and they're going to have more job openings. So the jobs are at stake. And so she said, if an executive leader fails to realize that, they will not be at their job for much longer, because the landscape of how employees are expecting to be treated has forever changed and will never go back to how it was in the past. And then she began to unpack this state of urgent need that she's experiencing when she's working with executives, and that is what Linda just said. If leaders don't spend their time in these 3 areas, they're going to fail. And these 3 areas are knowing your people, investing in your people, and keeping your people. And she described those as the 3 greatest needs of executive leadership at this point. Now, once she said that, I began to listen. We've happened to have no less than a dozen conversations in the last 10 days with senior level leaders, whether it's negotiating contracts or following up with some conversations. And they're all saying the same thing, Nathan. And it's incredible of how much people are aware of the post-COVID dynamic and the impact that that's having on people, and leaders' either great ability to adapt to that or inability to adapt to that because they don't recognize the landscape that they're looking at. And so when she said, know your people, invest in your people, keep your people, those three phrases just made so much sense to us, instantly validated with the work that we're doing in organizations, because there is this definite struggle there.
Are we going to teach people how to do that, or give them tips for, like, here's how you do that, or here's how Leadership Vision is doing that, or?
Well, part of what we're leaning into now, Nathan, or that we're being pushed, is why is it important? Because the CEO of others are saying to us, now, Nathan, this is helpful for all of us, the three of us in this company that are leading it, said, you spend all your time focusing on what you do and how you do it. And she goes, unfortunately, that's not relevant in the conversation. What's relevant to the conversation is why you're doing what you're doing and your knowledge of why it's important. How you do it doesn't really matter. But if someone understands that you know what they're struggling with, they'll do whatever you say. And guess what? She's right.
And I met and I said, I want to run this deck by you, and I just want you to be as critical as possible, but even like tell me. And that's when she was saying, you are naming some of the semantics. You're naming what the actual event would look like, the process. You are saying what you do, but I want to know why and sort of I want to know why and how. So the why and how is what unlocks the differentiator of what Brian and I do. So was saying there's no one, and she kind of put us in her camp, which was really honoring because she is amazing with people. And she said what Brian and you do are you jump in no matter what organization, no matter what's happening, and there is no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to figure out what's needed, who needs to be surfaced, what leader needs to have some attention, which relationship needs to be fixed, and what are the components of team that will surface in a way that then a leader will know what to do with it. And a leader will then know their people more in this shorthand, in this generative kind of way that helps just not know what their job structure is, but to know their impact and to know their potential or their motivation. Then that leads to then what kind of investment do you need to make in that person so that they're on a trajectory on the succession plan, or they're being prepared to take over another company in another place. So whatever that is, which then leads to how do you then keep the talent, and keeping through the lens of maybe it's keeping them connected, maybe it's keeping them integrated into the system, maybe it's keeping them as a friend, and then saying that's we're ready to part ways. You will still be a friend of the organization. I can still treat you with dignity and respect. I don't just have to be mean, but it can be this natural growing things change kind of way. So then that led to an early morning conversation at 6 a.m. 2 days ago, where Brian and I were sitting at the table and saying, what is it? So really didn't say these things. We were the ones that said, oh yeah, we get to know people, and then we invest in them, and then we help leaders invest in the people and help the team members invest in each other, which then leads and surfaces who needs to be kept, what things need to be let go, and how do you keep moving?
I'm just trying to think of, do we want to frame this as like a PSA?
I think here's the challenge. And Nathan, I've been wrestling with this for 10 days, which in my mind, in my world, is a long time. I'm interpreting like what we do and how we do it is all we talk about. Like, here's our strategy, here's the work that we're doing, and it's all this what and how. And when said that, it like broke open something for me. And I thought that is what we talk about. Like, we talk about here's our process, and here's why we coach, or here's what we do in coaching, and we demonstrate that. But we don't sit back and say, here's why coaching is so important now. And almost and so like on my runs or on my paddleboard, I'm thinking, if I were to, and this is how my mind works, if I were to never say what we do or how we do ever again, what would I talk about? To just demonstrate that we have this amazing amount of knowledge of why this work is important, and we just don't focus on that. And when was able to articulate why our work is important to him getting the attention of an organization to ensure that BIPOC entrepreneurs are focused on and invested in, and not just learning how to make a spreadsheet. Why is that important? Because CEOs don't have a chance to talk to their peers and be heard. And when he explained that why, I thought, we don't talk like that. And here's someone else that has just 6 months of experience with us articulating to me why our work is so important without ever saying we even work with strengths or we work with the teams.
Yeah.
He just explained why it's important for the organization. And so, Nathan, when I began to listen with that lens on, I was kind of convicted in a way that we don't sound like that. And then I read that amazing article in Fast Company, and those two women didn't talk one bit about what they do as an organization or what they speak on. They just gave 7 things that have changed forever because of COVID. And I'm like, who are they? And Linda and I talk to people almost every day. And so I began to listen differently. And I just began to talk or start with conversations like, well, how are you doing? Nathan, I don't think I told you this. I was talking to a high administrator in an educational district. And I said, how are you doing today? Now I know, and I kept talking before I let her answer. Now I know that it's like the second full month of school. This is like your second year of being in this COVID environment. I'm sure that there's a lot of changes that have happened. So just how are you doing? And within 10 seconds, tears coming down her face, expressing just how she isn't asked that question as a person, because as a leader, it's about taking care of the people, their emotional needs, the kids and their emotional needs, that no one ever asked her, how's she doing? As a marginalized professional, a woman who's a mother in a senior level leadership role, who's had to juggle all these different things, and yet no one's like, well, how are your kids adapting to going back to school? And she felt like, I'm the only one carrying all this stuff on my own. Things are going to snap. So why is our work important? Because we give these leaders a chance to share how they're actually feeling. I mean, no one else in their company has given them the time to do that. And just that alone allows them to have a conversation where they feel like they're known by someone, or they have a safe space to share how they're feeling, because they know that we provide an objective pair of ears to listen. Yeah. We're not going to judge or should them. We're just going to listen and let them share with us how they're feeling. Why is our work so important? Because it gives them the chance to be human for a little bit before they have to jump back in and keep fighting fires or keep trying to clarify what the changes are or continue to adapt. And it's that kind of listening which really helped me reframe this approach of how we talk, because we can talk about the how and the what we do all day long.
How do people not know this? Or why is this a revelation to all these people you've been talking with? I thought, going back to the emotional intelligence guy from 15, 20 years ago, everything I'm not disagreeing with you, but everything you're saying to me feels like old news. But why is it all of a sudden people are like, oh, wait, this is important to care about the people we work with that are working for us? Do you know what I mean? Well, is that a silly question?
Yes, because the first thing to be cut when there is a recession or when there's
professional development stuff.
Budgets are confined, the first thing is to we don't need professional development. Yeah. Oh, we don't need to invest in the people. Let's just keep, stay on the grind. And so then if an organization's not investing in you, there are very few leaders out there that really will say, yep, I'm going to prioritize myself when the building's on fire. And so it's the self-care, it's the emotional care. And so I think the ripples of the pandemic, it was almost like we were in a warm a pot. We were in a warm pot, And it's just the heat is turned up and up and up. And now people are boiling.
Right.
They're boiling. No more change. It's now rippled into all areas of life. And so to say, like, how am I supposed to care for myself now? I was just trying to figure it out when I was wearing my pajamas, pajama bottoms, and on these work calls, right, with fancy clothes on the top. Anyway, it's not just obvious.
It's interesting with these three words. Are you finding employees are not putting up with it, not putting up with the lack of attention to personal health and boundaries, and so they're just leaving? I mean, we know the whole Great Resignation. Yes. So it's so much harder to keep people because employees are like, I'm not putting up with not being cared for. I'm going to go somewhere where they do invest in me. They don't cut those budgets.
Part of what we know, many people experience a different way of doing work than they've ever done work before. So that's the doing part, like the tactical, operational, like I can get my job done virtually. Yeah. So we have a workforce that has experienced a different way of doing their work. That then led to a different way of being human, like a different way of spending your 5 work days. And we got a chance to experiment with the positive and the negative of what living our own life in our own places, what that actually meant. There were different ways that people adapted and self-cared for themselves, and ways that people had to adjust that was very uncomfortable and very difficult and very tense. So there was a different way of being. And that gave us, I think, a different mindset of, well, now, how am I going to engage the world? Because it isn't a simple mathematical equation of then how do you re-engage your workforce now that we're moving into this new era of going to work, whatever that means. There are some people that are looking forward to 3 to 5 days in the office because of the family dynamic. We're not judging what's happening in the home. We're saying there's a reality that's in the home that people are having to adapt and adjust to. There are other individuals who want to be at home because the quality of life that they have with that safety that home provides and the community that they live in, that's also something that needs to be respected. Now let's circle back to your question, Nathan. People, employees, leaders now know that there is a different way that this can be done. Now what? Yeah. And so as employers are asking their employees to make adjustments to come back to work, we're asking the question, are we or why are we not paying more attention to the whole person as that whole person engages? Because as one of the executives said that we talked to, she said, you better give me a damn good reason why I have to go back in the office. And her response was, invest in me. Yeah. Make it important. Yep. Invest in me, invest in my time, that I know why it's important for me not to only show up, but tie that into the bigger vision of why we're coming back to work. Make me experience investment so that I know that you care for me so I can stay. Because as you know, there are many, many options now for people to do work differently for different employers based on whatever their certain expectations are. So that it's just different.
What does invest in me mean? Does that just mean pay me more money, give me more flexibility, give me more vacation time, give me drinks in the break room, or like send me to conferences like that?
Could be.
It could be. Yeah, it could be any of those things, right?
It could be. It could be any of those. I think when I think about investing in your people, it's understanding what motivates them, what they need, why they even decided to work at this place. In particular, we even see that generationally, the younger generations need a why, need a purpose, want to map to that work, even if it's, learning a trade or something that will lead them to another kind of role. Right. But when we say investment, I don't think it's, get out the pool tables again because foosball is catching on and so is ping pong. But it is from that place of knowing and getting to know your people, what are you going to do with me now? Like, how will you help me grow my talent? How will you help me stretch my capacities? How will working with other people actually teach me some life skills or skills that will prepare me for higher levels of leadership when there is even more uncertainty and more change and sometimes more confusion. How do you lead through that? And so the investment is almost like creating a container for leaders to grow. I think there are leaders right now that are just saying, well, just I'll give them a title and then they'll figure it out. And there's just not that figuring out. And they also don't have there are very few universities, I think, or programs that are teaching people to lead in this way, maybe EMTs or crisis kind of leadership. But other than that, no one knows. It does, where we're at right now doesn't follow a logical, oh, this is where we are and this is what we need to do now. There are way too many unknowns in this time.
We have a great example, Nathan, from one of these conversations we've had in the last 10 days of this point of investing in your people, but not in ways that you may think. And this story came from a large company that we work with, and they're doing a come back to work initiative, and they redid one of the floors so that one of the floors is super homey and comfortable, and there's no cubes. Everything's like open collaborative spaces, but the 5 floors beneath it are still Cube Nation. So it's like 1 floor of well-intentioned and 5 floors of things as normal. When it comes to investment, I think that the invitation that we're facing now is, in this changed landscape, the ways that we invested before are probably not the ways we're going to be investing in the future. And we have an executive director that we're working with now, and she has this tremendous adaptive framework in this idea of investing in your people, because she's looking at not what they've done before, but she's saying, this leader of mine, she needs attention in this way. So that was a person focused. My leadership team needs to be paid attention to this way and invested in uniquely because of what they've all gone through, and we have some new people. And then she talked about the need to build community, and she's saying, I don't know what that's going to be like, but what we know is the last 2 years, our community, our connection, our sense that we're a big unit, that has all dissipated, and it's not there anymore. So what she's realized is, I need to invest in my people. And she's also realized that the landscape has changed, and the ways of investment that we did before won't fit to the current needs that are there. I think that what she's realizing is that the emotional, personal needs are leading, and the professional organization needs are following. I think that the learning I'm having with her is that however she got there, she realized that something's not the same, and it's going to take a new approach of investment because people have different needs now than they've ever had before, and they're bringing them to work.
It almost seems like we should invert this know, invest, keep. It should be keep, invest, know. And follow my ideation here.
Okay.
Leaders want to keep their people, right? In order to keep your people, you have to invest in them, which isn't new information. But what's different is, to invest in them, you have to know them as individuals, know them as people, to know what motivates them, what excites them, what inspires them. I mean, someone might be motivated by a foosball table, and that, so invest in that person.
No, it's true.
To get them to stay.
That is true.
So I wonder how.
Yep.
Nathan,
that's good.
That's $1 million question, right? How are we doing this?
Just yesterday, I was talking to an executive, and he is an executive leader in a very large company. And I was talking to him about this very same idea. And I said, from your vantage point in the company, what do you think the biggest or the greatest urgent need is? And without hesitation, he said, we are facing a constant war on talent. There has never been a time in my 30-year career when we have faced this amount of pressure to keep our best people, and that is from the top. We are living in fear that we're going to lose our best people because we cannot meet their expressed needs, concerns, or expectations, unquote. That framed it. And everything else that he was concerned about fed into that one need, that if we don't do something quickly, we are going to lose our best people. And he had this sense of urgency because he's got moved into a new role to help address this need. And part of what he was afraid of is that leadership was unable to make the adaptations necessary fast enough to keep the attention of the people, that we are actually doing something to change our culture, to adapt to the expectations that are now here. Like, we have to communicate that we're trying, at least communicate that we're trying, that we're not turning a blind eye or a deaf ear to the need, that we're aware, but please give us some time because we have to adjust. And I just really appreciated that perspective because, Nathan, like you said, he prioritized the need to keep talent as the number one concern, and now asking how. And his unique approach is, we have to create a narrative that we're adapting, that we're changing, that we're focused on this. And he went at it from story first to give them some time to figure out their strategy.
But you think of 10 years ago, there was a lot of writing and research being done about the war on talent.
It's been around for a long time.
And, you know, the different, or what I remember is that's when collaborative workspaces started to bubble up in a different way. Hey, we're going to think about how doing work differently, and then the shutdown. Be in one place, shelter in place. What did that do? It all of a sudden threw gas on the fire of there is a war on talent, and I don't know all the war tactics, but it's not fighting for it, but it's how do we find some really unique partnerships? How do we, we're not fighting for other people, but we're saying, no, I'm really going to figure out who you are, make sure that you are the right fit, and the best person for the job. I'm going to get to know your motivations and your different expressions, and then I want to plug you into a place where you can add value and feel fulfilled as an employee.
What can be done? I'm curious what the two of you have seen in the work that we're doing, helping a few companies with this, perhaps indirectly. Because you said earlier, Brian, like some people just want to be listened to. I keep going back to this, but other people want a foosball table. So what is like the helpful solution, or something that, our leaders that are listening to this can maybe at least get them kind of thinking in a certain direction?
Well, I would begin with acknowledging a fear of the unknown. Maybe the employee doesn't know what they're really asking for. Yeah. Maybe the leader doesn't even know what they need. And we say a bunch of things, but maybe it's just this undercurrent of, how do I keep my job? How do they want to keep me or invest in me, or even have that? So as Brian and I have gone in, now that we're back in person, we're also doing hybrid and virtual, but just like everybody else, as we are in person, some of the things that we are noticing are people even trying to position their strengths to be seen in a really positive light. And we're coming in saying there's been trauma that has happened by just being alive in the world in the last couple of years. So maybe some of those strengths are off. Maybe some of the strengths that you have are showing up in a little bit of a wonky way and they're not helpful to you. So let's reset. Let us look back and remember the points in our life where we feel strong, where we survived adversity, and how do we apply some of our own life lessons to what's happening now? So as we come in, we are just coming in a little bit more open-handed, not really like extremely descriptive, not prescriptive in our approach, even inviting what is the room going to tell us about where they've been, what they've been through, and where they are now, because that will inform where they're going.
Yeah. I was just thinking about all the work that we've been doing on our website and, creating products and other things. The part of what I think is difficult about my job is putting all those things online of like, hey, these are the services we offer. It is so customized. The two of you do such a great job of like meeting the needs of a group that it's not like going into Home Depot and being like, I need a wrench. Well, here's the 4 wrenches. Pick the one that fits your, whatever you need. It's like, it's like it's a much more complicated, problem and solution, I guess.
Because the highest compliment we received, or one of the high compliments we received, was, I have no doubt that you'll figure out once you get to know our people, you'll figure out the landscape. You'll figure out
high pressure.
who needs who needs attention, who needs to be in partnership. And so when that trust is expressed, we just have a way of, from two different angles, seeing and dissecting, as well as putting back together and kind of creating a spark once again.
Yeah.
Because we know that senior level leaders are doing the best they can to protect what they have, to rebuild maybe what they've lost, to invest in their environment so that their employees feel like there is a place for them to do good work. We know that leaders are making that effort, and there's a sense of fear that, if we bring someone in from the outside, that they might disrupt all that. And part of what we want to reflect is we want to reflect the work you've done, but we also want to ask, how can we be of best help to you as you're trying to build, invest, and keep your people engaged on what they need to pay attention to. Yeah. I think that's really what Linda is speaking to is we know the importance of bringing in objective perspectives and different voices to foster or to emphasize or strengthen what you're already trying to do. And sometimes the roles that we play are just to help guide people or to redirect them back towards the important things that these executive leaders are already investing in. And we're just helping in that process. We're not claiming to lead the way, but we are providing a place where people can be re-energized, gain some focus, as well as provide a place for people to really express how they're feeling and to not feel like there's any judgment or anything to be like coming at them and surprise them.
And Nathan, a lot of the employees that we have been talking to, they can name with quite acuity where they feel safe and where they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who's paying attention and who's not. And I think maybe even some of the virtual work, they were able to pick up some different cues, not just dial it in, get to work. I'm now like in the flow of it. There's some things that people are paying attention to, and employees have a greater dexterity of, even being able to name some of the things that they want or desire or need for their own growth I just haven't seen. I haven't seen it like that. And that also demonstrates the power shift from the employee has more power than some of the leaders, which sometimes is scary. But I remember being in grad school, and I was in a degree program about becoming a student affairs executive or administrator. And I remember one of my professors looking at us and saying, wow, if students knew how much power they actually have, the entire university system would change. Like that statement just kind of sat there. And this is the mid 90s. Okay. So 1990s. And I thought, what would that look like? Well, guess what? A pandemic will help that. As well as people deciding what kind of education they need. Maybe it's formal education and maybe it's informal. Maybe they're going to figure it out on their own. But when a student has a sort of an uprising or creates a kind of demand or need, everything shifts. No longer is it this power over. And I think we're seeing a similar thing in business.
I think leaders need to ask that question, is this employees have more power? Because that statement, employees have more power now than ever, has been a consistent theme in the conversations that we're having. However someone says it, it is a consistent theme. And I think that executive leaders would do well to ask themselves, what does that look like within my organization, within the teams that I'm leading? How is it that those requests are being known? Or how is it that tension or that agitation or that fear, how is that being expressed? Because I just think that that's something incredibly unique that we're hearing, is just that message. And it's, we can't always rely on literature and research to point us in the right direction. Sometimes we have to use that research and literature to just make us aware of what some of the themes are. Then we have to take that and then look at our environment and ask, how and where do I see that? And what can we do about it?
So if I could summarize this whole conversation, It seems like there's yes, well, good. There's two messages. One is for someone who's a leader of teams. So you've got people you're in charge of at whatever level, and it's to, if you want to keep your people, because there's a massive war going on for talent all across the United States, probably globally. You have to invest in those people in order to do that, invest in them to keep them. You really have to get to know them, which means, there's all kinds of assessments, there's all kinds of programs, but just sit down with coffee, like talk to them, get to know them, and figure out what they want. And not just what they want, but like what motivates them, what where they want to go in their career, like things like that.
I like the way you're inverting it.
Okay.
And when Linda and I were talking about this yesterday, we thought, we could talk about this for a long time, because these same three topics can be addressed to every one of us. What does it mean to keep you? And that's a question about belonging. What is that like now? How does that feel right now? And where and how do you feel threatened with that sense of belonging? How do you want to be invested in as an individual? Like, where do you think you need investment? Because I can't imagine the last 3 years, have reinforced all your beliefs. You probably had questioned something, and your skills have been challenged. So how do you need to be invested in? And what I think is the most critical part, especially with my journey, is how are you knowing yourself? How are you making sense of the way that you're adapting, navigating your life? How do you want others to know you? If there's ever been a time to invite people to renew their knowing of you, like, now's the time. And so there's this whole other side to this conversation, Nathan, that's focused 100% on you having like a self-evaluation of, how do I want to be known and understood in these three different areas.
Maybe that can be our companion podcast episode to this one that we'll do in the new year. Yeah. Well, Brian, Linda, thank you so much. This is, I like doing episodes like this where it's not necessarily a super organized outline of here's point 1, 2, 3, but it's more of philosophical thought, or here's some stuff that we've been, presented with recently, and let's kind of process it a little bit. So any final thoughts, either of you?
Be ready to be surprised.
Ooh.
By what you see, by what you learn. And I would encourage leaders to partner together in ways that maybe they haven't before, and really find ways to listen and find ways to live in the tension of polarities and not pick sides and not let fear lead to anger. Because there's one thing that we want to do at Leadership Vision, and that's shine light on the goodness of humans, the potential of teams, and what would it mean if organizations were thriving and alive and casting light into the world. And I'm optimistic and idealistic enough to believe that it could happen.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, sharing our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths, the strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. And if anything in this episode here today stirred you to action, or made you think, I need to really do something with this, I want to engage, I want to activate this, please reach out to us. You can send us an email to connect@leadershipvisionconsulting.com. We would love to talk with you about your team, talk with you about your organization, and find out maybe if there's a way that we could help you achieve whatever your goals are going into the new year. My name is Nathan Freeberg, and on behalf of our entire team, thanks for listening.